Thanks for joining us on Capitol View. I'm Fred Martino. It's our final show before next Tuesday's election, and coming up, we're going to look at some races in the state legislature. But first, everyone is talking about the presidential race, and the youth vote will be critical. That's why we spent some time at Southern Illinois University Carbondale to talk with students about their choice in the presidential election. We spoke with several SIU students and one student from the University of Illinois, and we heard a diverse set of opinions. It did not take long to find a supporter of former President Donald Trump, and we talked with an undecided voter as well. But more young people we spoke with are supporting Vice President Harris.
So this year I'll be voting for Harris. This is my first presidential election and I'm really excited.
Okay, and why are you voting for Vice President Harris?
So I'm voting for Vice President Harris because from what I've seen in the research that I've done, she seems to have a more sustainable plan for my generation and seems to be more focused on actually bringing in change to the government and to the policies and procedures that are done, rather than focusing more on running the country like a business and focusing on profits and, what we can do better, how to make more money, instead of focusing on the actual good of the American people.
My choice is going to be Donald Trump.
Okay, and why is that?
I think that Donald Trump brings more to the table. His last current in office, he did much better than Harris was even doing.
So there's clearly only one choice because I'm not a fascist. I prefer Harris over Trump for sure. I'm not super happy with Harris just because of a few of her different viewpoints via transgender rights, was also the Gaza situation as well. There's some issues with that. But besides that, I would rather go with that and approve from that than just go with Trump, because there's nothing really there. There's no good policy along those lines. And frankly, there's not actually any integrity there either. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. It's not necessarily a hatred towards Trump by any means. And naturally, I think policy is an important thing to look at rather than just the nostalgia we see online and the yelling back and forth from either side. But I think there is a clear change. I was first old enough to vote for Obama's second term, which I did. And I think when he left office, there was a certain new level of unity. We were over the mini phobias, not just in a more unified, although there's still plenty of work to go or accomplish, but there's a big accomplishment over, closer unification in race, a lot of the phobias with homosexual, gender fluidity, whatever it may be. I'm not advocating one way or another, but it seemed more unified as a country overall. And then I think, although Trump implemented some economic policies that clearly benefited the country, that unification seemed to have broke. And something, I think a lot of the work that the Obama administration had put in place, I don't know. I think it's a matter of, do we want to be unified as a country, or is it just getting the best bang for your buck and maximizing the dollar? I don't necessarily think that's the always the right way to go. We'll always figure it out as a country, as we always have, but that's my strong opinion. I think the unification needs to be strengthened, and we need to come back a little bit more together as a country in that fashion, if that makes sense.
Well, I personally feel like Kamala Harris has some great facts, and she is pointing out a lot. And in the past, I had disagreed with a lot of things that Trump had said, but within time and history, I had shaped my thoughts in agreeing with a lot of things Trump has done for America. But that doesn't mean that Kamala Harris doesn't tend to make America great again.
So you're thinking you're going to vote for Vice President Harris?
I think I am going to. There are a lot of things that she says, and with me being a part of the LGBTQ, I feel like she would make it a lot better for America and a lot safer for me.
I'm going to vote for Kamala because, we need a woman. Like this world has been ran by men for years and years and years. Like, can we get a woman up in here? Like, let's just I feel like she'll make the world a better place.
I am voting for Kamala Harris. And why am I voting for Kamala Harris? Because, like she said, we need to go forward and we do not need to regress America.
So I'll be honest, I'm undecided. I do still plan on voting, but there's a lot of conflicting information out there. Me personally, I don't identify with an individual party. So that is very hard to navigate in finding a third party. So I'm just looking to do a little bit more research before I vote to find the best candidate. But as of right now, I don't know.
Make sure to vote. In Illinois, you can even register in person on Election Day. And starting Tuesday night at 5, join WSIU TV for nonstop election coverage from PBS News. There are also closely watched races in the Illinois General Assembly. More on that and other stories in the state this week with Jeremy Gorner of the Chicago Tribune and Charlie Wheeler, emeritus director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program at the University of Illinois Springfield. Jeremy, you reported recently that the state GOP leader is trying to sell hope in the uphill battle to cut into the Democratic stranglehold in Illinois. Tell us more.
Yeah, Fred. So House GOP leader Tony McCombie, I think, has accepted the fact that they're just significantly, outfunded compared to the Democrats in the legislature, their campaign arm. And she's kind of looking ahead to the 2030 census when they'll have another redistricting opportunity. Republicans have often accused Democrats who are in the legislative supermajority of gerrymandering the legislative districts following the 2020 census, and which they believe has significantly contributed to the vast supermajorities that the Democrats have in the legislature. So she has her sights on trying to maybe try to regain seats a little bit of a time, couple here in one election, couple there in future elections. That's kind of what she's trying to do. The problem is they are just outmatched in terms of funding. I mean, for example, the state Democratic Party and the Illinois House Democrats campaign arm, they reported, maybe $5.5 million that they had left in their campaign coffers through September. This was after spending about $7.7 million last quarter. If you look at the state Republican Party and the House Republicans campaign group, they only had a little over $1 million on hand, and this is after spending, maybe $3.35 million last quarter. And I'm not even counting, in terms of the financial disadvantage that Republicans have, I'm not even counting what House Speaker Chris Welch and Senate President Don Harmon have in their for their campaign funds. It's just it's big mismatch there, obviously. That being said, Democrats obviously control the state. This is a decidedly blue state. And I spoke with, one political observer who also said that one thing Republicans are going to also have to compete with, and to the extent that there are swing districts in Tuesday's election in some of these legislative districts, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of impact Donald Trump's presence on the ballot will have down ballot. Somebody I talked to suggested that there could be a little bit of a guilt by association possibility for that Republicans running for these legislative seats will have to compete with Trump at the top of the ballot, because Trump is not popular in Illinois. He's lost the last two presidential elections, 2016 and 2020, each by 17 points. And it doesn't look like that needle is improving one way or the other for Trump as he's running for another term here. So basically, to the initial question about what Republicans are trying to do, they're trying to gain seats little by little if they can, and see if the odds will be in their favor come 2030. If when there's another redistricting opportunity.
Yeah, we'll have to be watching for sure. And now, briefly, Charlie, you have more from a Chicago Sun-Times article. It says that there are some Illinois House races to watch where suburban challengers could affect the Springfield power balance. Tell us more.
Yeah, I would criticize, maybe that's too strong a word, but I would take issue with the notion that this could affect the power balance. No way. The Democrats are going to come out with a supermajority. Back in the day, people blame Mike Madigan because he gerrymandered the map. Well, the most recent map, Madigan did not gerrymander. It was gerrymandered by the Dems. And before that map, in the House, the Dems had a 73-45 advantage. Under the new map, there's now 78-40. And odds are that the Republicans are going to actually lose seats. One of the seats that was discussed in the Sun-Times article, and one that I think is probably the most likely to swing, one of the two I think most likely, is in the 52nd district, where Marty McLaughlin from Barrington Hills is being challenged by Maria Pearson from North Barrington. And in that district, the Democrats dominated, dominated is too strong, but every statewide Democrat won the district 2 years ago. And McLaughlin won by less than 5 points against an opponent who didn't have very much support from the Democratic Party. And so the odds are very strong, I think, that Peterson, who's a very hard worker, is going to win this time around. One of the districts that I think is going to be in play that was not included in the Sun-Times article is the 47th House District, where Representative Amy Grant of Wheaton is being challenged by Jackie Williamson, who is also of Wheaton. And in this district, the fact that Grant has been supported by the pro-life groups and Williamson is a very ardent reproductive rights backer, I think that'll have a significant impact on that race. One of the things to remember is that the demographics of the suburbs have changed dramatically in the years that I've been watching. Part of it is the fact that some once lily white, solidly Republican districts in the south suburbs are now majority minority, solidly Democratic. On the west side, the Black community has moved westward. And so areas that once were solid, Cicero Township, for example, solid Republican, now it's solid Democrat. And you also have the Latinos moving into the suburbs so that cities like Aurora and Elgin have very significant Hispanic populations, which tend to vote Democratic.
It's a fascinating thing, isn't it, Charlie? And this is a national issue. You know, I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and we heard this week how former President Donald Trump was visiting Allentown for a rally, and Allentown is a majority Latino city now. So,
and one of the things that let me add another thing about the suburban vote: the fact that the Dobbs decision came down, and suddenly reproductive rights are a major issue among suburban women. I think that has really contributed to the Democratic surge in the suburbs. And as Jeremy noted, the fact that Donald Trump is, for want of a better term, he is considered quite despicable by a lot of suburban women. That's not going to help down ballot Republicans in these races.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the effect of reproductive rights in the races coming up. Jeremy, another election story now. Capital News Illinois ran a report from a partner that noted non-citizen health care programs like the one in Illinois are drawing presidential campaign attention. Tell us more.
So a couple of years ago during the pandemic, at least in just talking about Illinois, the state launched a program that that provided publicly subsidized healthcare for older immigrants who were in the country without authorization. And there's been certain, there was an expansion of that program. There's been at least one expansion of that program since this went into effect in 2020, or when it passed in 2020. And the issue, and it became starting as a campaign issue, or really for Governor Pritzker, not so much a campaign issue, but a policy issue after he was reelected, where there were projections that this would put like a $1 billion budget hole for the state. Ended up costing the state last year, I believe it was $500 million. And which for this current budget, it's cost around the same thing. This does not include the money that the state has been providing for migrants. This is totally separate. But what we've seen is that you have states like California, Minnesota, and others who have implemented similar programs for older immigrants, and who are in the country without authorization. And because of this trend, what we're seeing, as you mentioned, Fred, it has become a national campaign issue. It's something that Trump has capitalized and Republicans have capitalized on, because it's obviously a program that is too costly. And Trump, to begin with, has taken a very aggressive stance on immigration. And he's using, and Republicans, among other things, on Kamala Harris, have used this issue as just, another point about why they feel that her immigration policies are weak. I know that in the state of Illinois, this program, though, for older immigrants was capped. I believe there were, Governor Pritzker closed enrollment earlier this year because it was becoming too costly, and because he could foresee that in the coming months it was going to be too costly. Which, the fear is that thousands of people who would normally be recipients on this program would not be able to take advantage of it. So I believe it was about 6,000, I think, is what the number was. So the point is that this is a program in Illinois that has cost, in the last couple of years, each year it's cost in the neighborhood of $500 million.
Yeah.
And
some would argue, underreported, even if it does not have an effect on our election, worth talking about this week, because this is being used politically elsewhere where it may have an issue. So it may have an effect, rather. So, speaking of healthcare, Jeremy, I do want to return to reproductive rights and that issue with Charlie. Capital News Illinois had another interesting report from a partner this week. This story is about an Indiana woman who sought health care in Illinois due to abortion restrictions in her state. Tell us about that, Charlie.
All right. Well, this is the case of a 33-year-old woman and her husband, who are the parents of two young boys, and they decided to continue their family. And she was pregnant, and everything was going fine. They went in for an ultrasound, and they found out that the spine of the fetus was, I guess deformed is the right word. There was a hole in the spine and a lemon-shaped head, as it was described in the story. That was the indicator of a more severe form of what the term they used was a neural tube defect.
And bottom line, Charlie, was she could not get health care in Illinois or in Indiana, so she had to come to Illinois to get health care.
Indiana has a near total abortion ban with limited exceptions for life of the mother, rape and incest, and fatal fetal anomalies. Well, the doctor said, well, what your fetus has is this abnormality, but there was so much red tape to get permission to do it in Indiana that she came to Illinois, she came to Champaign and had it done. And she, in the story, she talked about her frustration saying, and this is her quote, there were, quote, a lot of white men in my uterus right now making decisions. And so she went to Illinois, to a clinic in Champaign, had the procedure, and she says she's not sorry about it. It was the right thing to do.
Charlie,
and she's hoping that by telling her story, she will make it more aware, people more aware of what the horrible implications of this are for women who are in a position that she and her husband found themselves in.
And Charlie, just to wrap up, because I want to get to one more story with Jeremy, you think these stories that we're hearing all over the country, where there may be votes not only for the presidential race where reproductive rights is on the ballot, but actual state laws around the country on reproductive rights. Do you think this will be a fundamental factor in the Tuesday election?
Oh, I think so. As I indicated earlier, certainly in our House races, and in other suburban areas. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to see is when the votes are finally all tallied, to see if the states in which there are abortion rights measures on the ballot, if those measures receive more favorable votes than any of the candidates for any other office.
Okay, very interesting. We have about 4 minutes left, Jeremy, for a story I wanted to get to. It was part of your reporting for the Chicago Tribune and a follow-up for us here at Capitol View. You recently wrote about a Kankakee County board chair who stepped down from his position after taking a job with a firm building an electric vehicle battery plant. Tell us more.
Right. So last year, the Pritzker administration celebrated, moving the Chinese-owned electric battery vehicle manufacturer Gotion to the city of Manteno, which is in Kankakee County, as part of this package, as part of the package given to Gotion. Governor Pritzker said that they would be getting about $500 million in tax incentives, and there could be more potentially from the federal government. As a result, though, there was some backlash from residents and a community group, local and Republicans in the area, saying that, among other things, they were concerned about, they were raising fears about communist infiltration when, it was discovered that the parent company of Gotion, basically in their bylaws, said that, had made some reference to falling under the Chinese Communist Party. So there's a lot of fears that were being stoked by far-right Republicans about communist infiltration coming to Manteno. And so some Republicans have made this a national issue because there's a similar plant that is going to be slated to be built in Michigan. Now, at the same time, the Kankakee County Board approved itself of being one of the 10 taxing bodies for the Gotion site in Manteno, which is a former Kmart factory. And basically, as part of this deal, property taxes on this new Gotion site would be capped at $2 million a year for 30 years. So fast forward about a year later, Andrew Wheeler, who is the chairman of the Kankakee County Board and participated in approving Kankakee County as a taxing body, takes a job with Gotion. So the issue is that he didn't want to step down as board chair while still working at Gotion, but he wasn't attending to Kankakee County Board business. So he basically resigned last week. But separate from that, I had asked another county official, about the optics really of him taking a job at Gotion when his board participated in giving them, in bringing them to Manteno. And I was told it was not a quid pro quo, despite of what the appearance may look like. But nonetheless, what you have here is a former board chairman that participated in bringing Goshen to Manteno now takes a job with the company. So that's basically where we're at right now.
And it may raise awareness, Jeremy, that there was no waiting period for someone to take a job after voting on an incentive for that future employer. We know that in states around the country, state legislators often do have waiting periods. So fascinating, important reporting, and thank you for bringing it to us. Something to be aware of, and an enormous project there, as you pointed out, about $500 million in state incentives over many years for that EV battery plant. Jeremy, Charlie, thank you both for being with us.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to be here, Fred. Thanks.
Good luck on Election Day. That is it for us. Make sure to vote if you haven't done so already. For everyone at WSIU, I'm Fred Martino. Have a great week.